show, everyone. This is Everything Under the Sun. My name is Ty. So happy you can join me today on the show. uh, it's been kind of crazy this past week. Just a lot going on. I feel like I've actually been the most productive that I've been in so long. And I don't know where it's coming from, like where the energy is coming from, where like the motivation is coming from. But I'm waking up early. I'm like doing shit that like I don't know. It's kind of crazy. It's been really good, but I was just talking about how, well, not to you, but I was talking to some people about just how I've haven't had time to like really just chill, and it's kind of crazy in this time of, isolation and social distancing, not really having time to just like relax and chill. But it's kind of like I've just been like filling my time with just so much stuff, and maybe I've been distracting myself with, you know, trying to stay busy so I don't like kind of go crazy with all of this. But whatever it is, it's not a bad thing, So, but I have noticed that like I haven't been able to snack as much as I want to. Like I have so many snacks. I bought these snacks like almost a month ago, like cookies and granola bars and chips and stuff like that, and you know, uh, and I still haven't eaten them. Like it's just like they've just been sitting there, and I bought the granola bars because I was like, you know what, like I always feel bad for snacking sometimes, so I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna get some granola bars and I'm gonna snack that way, and that way I feel better about snacking. Those fucking granola bars are still sitting there. I don't know why. I don't know why. It's just like I just don't snack as much as I used to, or watch as much stuff as I used to, which is kind of crazy, and I kind of miss it. I miss not doing much and laying down and just watching stuff, but also like I find myself just getting kind of bored with just like sitting around and watching stuff. So I think that's kind of how I got into this kick of just starting to do stuff. But anyway, one of the shows that I did start watching though is this show called Lore, and it's based off of a podcast. I'm not sure if any of you have heard that podcast, but if you haven't, check it out. It's a really amazing podcast, and it kind of just speaks about folklore that's like gone throughout time and how it's like like how different stories and things are associated with it. Really great podcast, and they turned it into a show where it's like it's like the guy's podcast voice and stuff like that, but they kind of started adding kind of like cinematic acting and stuff into it. So kind of like a reenactment of a situation, but it's not like kind of one of those ID channel reenactments. It's like a kind of like it's just like a show, but it's like each episode is different and it's based on like a different lore. But it's a really great show. If any of you haven't checked it out, it's on Amazon Prime. Check it out. I mean, I'm sure you can just find it online someplace where things just stream online magically. But Amazon Prime or not, but check it out. The podcast is also really great. If you haven't heard it, I mean, even if you have listened to the podcast and have listened to some of these episodes, like also just like watch the show too because it's pretty great. It's kind of heavy too. Like I watched it and I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna watch it because it's shorter. It's between like 30 and 40 minutes, so it's not necessarily one of those shows that's like 45 minutes to like 50 minutes to an hour where you're not really sure if you should dedicate your time to watching that. But it's kind of short and sweet, and it's very captivating, very interesting, but it's also very heavy. So like there's some deep concepts where it's like, damn, like I want to watch another episode, but that's also super heavy stuff, and I'm not really sure if I should watch another episode. But good stuff. Check it out if you want to. So I'm not sure whether I should explain the episode first. You know what, I'm gonna go do a box drawing first. So this week's episode is Taking Risks, and I'm going to explain something about this episode because I did something a little different with how this episode is going to be played out, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. But for now, I'm going to go to this box, and we're going to figure out what the next topic is for next week. Anyone that is interested in seeing topics in, send those into everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com or any of the social media pages that I'm going to plug in at the end of this podcast. So Shook the Box picking out the episode for next week and seeing what that is. And it looks like traveling. Traveling is going to be the episode for next week. And this is something that I love. I love traveling. I think it's something that I hope that anyone can do throughout their life. I mean, like, even if it's traveling, just like within your own state, within your own country, like, you know, just travel, get outside of your environment, do something different, see something new, and see, I mean, see what that brings you. I mean, I've always loved traveling. This is an amazing topic. I'm really excited that I got picked. But yeah, traveling has always been part of me. My mom was in the army, so when I was young, I actually lived in Germany since like until I was like 5 years old, and then moved to Virginia. We weren't like an army family, like a military family that kept moving around, so like that was kind of fortunate because I had so many friends that came and went because we lived in like military areas. So like they were getting stationed in different areas. So uh, I've had a lot of friends that travel to a lot of places, and a lot of friends that I've never seen again because they had to leave to travel to places. And um, but traveling has always been something that's been so passionate for me, and I've always loved it. And fortunately, I've had many opportunities to travel and see amazing things. And I don't know. I think this topic is going to be really amazing. So taking risks is coming down because that is what we're talking about today, and traveling is going up onto the wall. So this week, going to go right to this. This week we are talking about taking risks, and my original idea for this episode was to get a conglomerate of ideas of what it meant to take risks. So interviewing 5, 6 people and putting about 5 to 7 minutes of an interview with them, kind of their thoughts on what it means to take risks, and putting that into one cohesive episode to kind of just get this idea of just how dynamic risk taking can be, and what that means for different people, and just like what can come out of like realizing like those differences between people. So that turned out to not be the situation. So what turned out to be the case is that as I started to do these interviews, I realized very fast that talking about this idea of taking a risk is something that cannot be shortened into a 5 minute to 7 minute conversation. Like this is a heavy topic, and apparently, I mean, it means so much, and I know that it means a lot to me as far as like what I can speak about. I mean, I can speak for an hour about this, if not more, but like to know that this is so meaningful for other people, and that's kind of what I want to get at with this podcast, is like these topics, these things that are so meaningful for us, yet we don't really have the time to think about them, yet we don't have the time to realize how influential and impactful they are in our lives and what they mean for who we are and who we're growing to be. And taking risk is so much part of that, and you'll hear from the interviews that are conducted how these are impacting the lives of these individuals. So, okay, the original idea was to get 5 or 6 individuals to speak about their ideas, but it's not easy to fit that into a 5 to 7 minute conversation. So these interviews ended up lasting a bit longer. So instead of putting 5 or 6 episodes into one episode, I'm actually just going to do a two-part episode of taking risks. This is going to be part one, and part two is going to be another episode, another recording. So this episode will have one person that was interviewed. The next episode will have another person that was interviewed, and that's basically what it's going to be. Because, yeah, I mean, there was no way to get all of that content, all of like the words of 5 to 7 different people to make something that's like in one episode. I mean, you'll be listening forever. So yeah, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a two-part series. This is going to be the first part, and the second part will come shortly after, and it's basically just going to be on taking risks and these different ideas of what it means to take risks for different people. So to start this off, I there was this incident that happened that isn't all that great, but what this guy did in response to it was just really really amazing. I'd like to share this, and I think it's part of taking risks in that way, because I mean, this guy definitely took a risk in this way. So I'm just going to go into this just for reference. I live in Northern California, and this is an incident that happened in my area about 15 minutes from where I live. It's in a different city. I say that in air quotes because it's not really a city. It's like more of a town. This happened in Eureka, California. Some of you may know it. Some of you may have driven through it on your way up to Oregon, or if you're going along the coast on the 101. So this is the story. On Wednesday, May 13th at 8:46 p.m., Eureka police officers were dispatched to Cooper's Gulch Recreation Area after a woman reported a man had choked and assaulted her. So Cooper's Gulch is just this, as it said, it was a recreation area. People can go hiking trails there. You can go disc golfing there. You can There's a skate park there. There's just like a regular park there for kids and stuff like that. There are tons of different activities. So it's a very popular park as far as just activity is concerned. But I see that maybe now during this time it's probably less activity because of this whole social distancing thing. So police were dispatched because the woman had reported being choked and assaulted. The officers found the victim in a grassy area south of the skate park that I just mentioned. The woman had been stabbed multiple times in the back and neck area and was transported to the hospital to be treated for her wounds, which fortunately weren't fatal. The woman was intoxicated and was unable to clearly articulate exactly what happened in the situation. She had told officers that she was preparing to leave the park when an unknown male attempted to get her attention. She ignored the male and walked away. The woman told the officer that she was assaulted by a light skinned male with a shaved head, possibly Hispanic, in his 20s. So the crime is currently being investigated as an assault with a deadly weapon because evidence was found at the scene. Two social media posts have been floating around and being shared around, which give a lot of people the idea that multiple women are in danger of some kind of serial killer that's on the loose. So, despite the allegations of the posts, police officers have no evidence that are showing that a serial killer is involved in the situation whatsoever. So, that's a situation that happened just a few days ago in Eureka. And in response to this, there's this guy. He's a local resident. His name is Michael Williams. And I mean, I'm assuming that he is fine having his name out there because he plugged in his Instagram account and stuff like that after, like, in the Facebook post. But so in response to this, he decided to dress in leggings and a hoodie and walk through the trails, like, of the different parks. Like, there are different nature trails throughout the county. So he went specifically to Cooper's Gulch where this incident happened and started walking around the trails pretending to be a female, hoping to lure out the person that attacked the woman. In his Facebook post, he says, "Watch predator turn prey real quick," and and I thought that was the most hilarious thing. And in the post for this episode on my Instagram and stuff, I will post the posting from Facebook on there as well, so you have reference. Also, the link to his Instagram account and stuff like that if you want to find him and add him and stuff. So I don't know. I thought that that was a really amazing thing, and I thought that that was a way of kind of showing. I don't know. I thought that was a great example of kind of taking a risk in some way because taking a risk is so dynamic, and I think that as we kind of think about the topic more, we realize like it kind of goes into all these things that we're doing, whether it's like taking a risk with your actual life, like what this guy is doing, or taking a risk by embarking on a new journey that may be scary or you may find uncertainty. And so that's what we're going to be speaking about today is going to be speaking about this idea of taking risks and what that means for people. So in my first interview on taking risks, I was joined with a good friend of mine, Rebecca, who is a water quality engineer. We went to undergrad together, and she was kind enough to share her time and her experiences of what it means for her to take risks. So this is the interview. Listen in and see what you think. Your idea of what it means to take a risk.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
It's like,
absolutely. I talked about your topics with my sister and my mom
mhm,
earlier, and it was really funny because we're all so identical in so many ways. But when we took your 4 points that you wanted to discuss,
mhm.
all of us had radically different answers. So,
Wow.
we were raised by the same person, or that person was present, and we all thought we had the same ideals and ideas about everything, but it was so different. It was kind of humorous, and it really opened my eyes to how how radical a personality or just the experiences that somebody lives through changes your idea of risk taking
Mhm.
and how you perceive a question about risk taking.
I think that's amazing what you just said, and I think that kind of goes perfectly into just like this first thing. I mean, you realizing that just within your own family and within how many similarities that you have with these family members, that even that idea of what it means to take a risk is so different. So, and I mean that speaks to the different experiences that we have in life, the different people that we come across, and the different ways that we start defining these things that mean so much for us, and the things that we obviously have to confront some point in our life. So, I guess with that, like, what do you define as taking risks?
Um, so I Googled risks in a company. I Googled what it meant to take a risk in a company. Why do executives get paid more than entry level, even though your entry level might be genius. Why do they get paid more, and what defines the risk? And it put it clearly to me personally too, because risk taking is assuming all of the liability of whatever you're taking the risk on. So, when it comes to CEO, or, an owner of a company, they are assuming all of the liability of the company. So obviously they get paid more, because if something fails within the company, they take the brunt of the hit of that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that translates perfectly in life too. If you're willing to take that risk, whether it be professionally or personally, and move across the country, or moving close to your in-laws, whatever it could be, when you're willing to take that risk, you're also accepting the liability that can come with that too. The risk of loss, the fear of what can dramatically go wrong in that same choice. So for me, taking a risk is how you perceive that risk. If you fail, how bad is it going to be when you fail? Because that carries the same weight as the positives that can come from the risk. So I mean, that's when I think of taking risks, I'm kind of an all or nothing person anyway. I'm naturally a risk taker, so it's hard for me not to just jump after that spontaneous, opportunity, and the next big thing. What's the next radical decision that I can make in my life, and how can I make it stable for my family too? So, and sometimes it doesn't always bring stability, but that's part of it.
Mm-hmm. Something that you mentioned was just that idea of, I guess, somewhat making it a calculated risk, where you're weighing out what could possibly happen out of taking that risk. I mean, a lot of times, I guess when we take risks, sometimes we can calculate almost like the pros and cons of the situation, what that negative outcome might be. But then there are other situations where, also like you were saying, where you try to keep in mind the stability of, your family and like the people that are around you. But sometimes taking that risk also can cause some unsteadiness in that situation. And I guess it's like, like that can be something that also just keeps people from even taking that next step forward. I guess like, like what has that meant for you as far as just like trying to take these risks and put, like other people in your life into consideration, and how do you take that radical move and move forward with that?
There are so many different dynamics that go into that. So when I think of how I want to raise my kids, there's going to be traits from me, traits from their father, and where I want them to be fearless. I want them to see me be fearless in the choices that I make, and confident that, even if I fail, I'm still going to persevere. So when I take risks, I even though they're very young, I let them know, in their age range, what's going on. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do this really big exciting thing, but we're going to do it together. And if we don't like it, that's okay. We're going to communicate about it, and if we need to change something, we're going to know. You're going to tell me, I'm going to tell you, and we're going to do things that make us happy. So, when it comes to the making the choice of the risk taking, in involving family members, sometimes not all family members are a great idea to involve, because they might have the more traditional sense of stay home, or that's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
This, you need to do this typical American family style thing. But for me, risk taking is teaching my children to be fearless and how to persevere, how to overcome obstacles. So and I haven't decided yet if that's a selfish aspect yet or not to take, because I want them to know these things, and see me persevere. And while it might be a big win for me, I also want it to be a big win for them. But if it's not comfortable for the whole family, that can bring other complications. But as far as it's the big picture that I really look at, and I am an incredibly spontaneous person. So sometimes I do have to reel back a little bit on the risk taking. But I think in general, I don't think it's a hard lesson to learn. I think it's a healthy thing to experience as a family. But I have learned, I've taken some very big risks in the past year, just year alone. have learned that maybe not everybody needs to know the full big picture plan before it actually is implemented. Just it adds some complications and some hard feelings, but in the same sense, it also gives you a different sense of communication with people that you never had before.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely get that, and I think that's really amazing. Just, that idea of kind of having your family with you as you're taking these risks, because I mean, obviously, it's going to influence the lives of more people than just you, and I think that's something that's, I mean, like I had mentioned, like, like that is something that does keep people from taking those risks. So I guess, like, from what you've experienced and what you've observed, like, what have you noticed have been obstacles in taking those risks, or things that have kept you from taking those risks, or kept people that you know of from taking risks that could potentially be something really amazing for them, but there are, I guess, other things that could be coming up and standing in the way of that.
So for me, one of the largest risks I've ever taken, I've packed up my family and moved up the coast. I mean, moved multiple states away, hundreds of miles away from family, a good ways away from our comfort zone. And by displacing my family, I had the impression that I would be putting us in a situation where we would have to lean on each other and build each other up and start from scratch. And it was a great professional move for both my husband and myself, and it it was an incredible experience. You know, every new place, every city you experience, every new region of the country you can move to, all of it provides different cultural aspects that you never experienced before, especially when you're living in the heart of it. But everyone has to be on board. So if you're a risk taker that is living with a non-risk taker, it can provide more strain on that whole relationship and the whole experience. So for me, it was really a crash and burn type of situation. Um,
Mhm.
and then this whole national crisis happened, which just inflamed everything at the very end when you think it can't get worse. But I said before, it's about the perspective. The whole point of risk taking isn't just weighing the odds, but it's the perspective that you choose to take if you crash and burn, when you crash and burn, or if you're successful. Are you going to succeed and really meet those goals, exceed those goals that you had hoped and dreamed for? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to do great things with it, or are you going to plateau? Are you going
Mhm.
to are you going to take advantage of the situation and get lazy with it, or are you going to do great things? So I think that maintaining the proper perspective while you're with those that you're on this journey with, and
Mhm.
reinforcing that perspective is key to being successful with risk taking. Because when you have that safety net of communication and loved ones and those that support you, your proper support group, I mean, it can change the entire risk, into a goal.
Mhm.
And I think that's my fuel behind, why I just go for it. I don't really think about things too much because then you can talk yourself out of it. But, if the pros outweigh the cons, don't think about it too much, just go for it, you know?
Mhm.
One of my favorite quotes is actually it's a cartoon, the movie Sing. Buster Moon says, "The only place to go when you're at rock bottom is up," and
Yeah.
that's the perspective that I take. When you're at rock bottom, the only place left to go is up. So when things start to get hard, that's really what I think in the back of my mind. Just keep it
Mhm.
positive.
And that is something to always keep in mind, because a lot of times we get this idea where we get stuck in our head of, like that like that worst case scenario, and somehow it's very vague, it's very ambiguous, and it makes it so much more daunting to pursue those things or even embark in those things, because you don't really think about that possibility of, where would the bottom be, and what would I do in that situation if I did hit that bottom, and how would I get out of it. And I think a lot of times, like, people feel as if they go into that place, they're not going to be able to come out of it. And I think that that can be said, like, physically within, like, an experience that we have taking a risk, or even emotionally, just the repercussions from taking those risks, or just like dealing with things in our everyday life, kind of that risk of what could be in that darkness or could be in that space is something that's so much scarier than like what could actually be there if we just kind of took that leap.
Right. Right. Well,
Um,
when you really have nowhere left to go, if your risk does take a turn for the worst, one of the things is back to perspective. If you have nowhere else to go, you are out of ideas of moving forward, the simplicity of life is it's never going to be clearer.
mhm.
There aren't a ton of choices of where to invest your money or what bill you need to pay next. They're all late. you you
Yeah.
you just have to take it one thing at a time, and it makes life so simple, and it is a clean slate. It is the very beginning. It's a fresh beginning. And yeah, there might be some things that are stressful, but I do think that it is a little bit of a clarifying moment once you realize, okay, I did take that risk, and this I knew what I was getting myself
Mhm.
into, and now I'm where I knew was a possibility. So where do we go from here? Where's my new beginning?
Mhm. And I think something so big is that, with taking risks, I think we obviously know this idea of not being able to go back and do something different than we did before. So we take that leap and we've already leapt. So it's like we kind of have to take whatever comes with that. And I guess like with that idea of moving your family, and I guess that being a big risk as you stated, would you do that again? Like if you had the opportunity?
I would. I
Mm,
think if things are just destined to be, people tend to gravitate towards comfort zones. And in comfort zones, I mean, by definition, that's someplace you're comfortable. That's a space you don't want to leave. It's a space you don't want to explore outside of. But parallel with risks, if you don't explore outside of your comfort zones, you can't excel much further
mhm,
past your comfort zone. So by stepping out of my comfort zones, I've found myself more successful. I have professionally created a network of friends in a male dominant industry that I
mhm,
have the utmost respect with. And long time friends, and these are people that I never would have met if I hadn't had spoke up in a conference or volunteered to speak on a podcast or stepped outside of my comfort zone a little bit just to say, I'm here, and I want to talk about this too. So
mhm,
you know, as far as that goes, I absolutely would. And I think even though I have taken a hard hit, the rest of the world has too. And I'm not the only person ever that's experienced this. Other people
mhm,
have too, and other people have succeeded. So I don't feel like it's the end of the line. And I think that there is going to be a lot more risks for me and a lot more boundaries pushed. There's just too much to see. There's too much to experience. There's too many people to meet and network with for me to just, lay down and give up now. So I absolutely think I would. Boundaries boundaries are a gray area for me.
mhm. And I mean, yeah, boundaries can definitely kind of box you in. I think so many people are kind of bound by certain situations where, I mean, just like, I mean, like you mentioned, where some women may even feel so intimidated not to even move in that domain of a male-dominated occupation or even try to expand and kind of make themselves known. And I think that obviously like that is taking a risk in itself. And and there's always so much uncertainty behind that because there's that again fear of what is outside of this comfort zone, but everything lies outside of your comfort zone, like all of the possibilities, all of like the ways that we grow and learn and gain more understanding in life. And I guess like you had mentioned these things that drive you to move forward and kind of continue to take these risks. And I guess like that does kind of answer this question of just like what does continue to move you forward to take these risks when you know that maybe you put yourself in a situation where you're very comfortable and you have like almost everything you idealized at one point in your life, but now you're seeing this opportunity to change something. And although things can be the same and say perfectly fine, like what pushes you to continue to take that risk to shake everything up again only for the potential to, reach some place that like you idealize or that you want to move towards.
So many things come to mind because, I believe that no great policy comes from a one-sided point of view. You need a collaborative group of ideas to come up with a really great policy that is going to cover, every aspect of the topic.
Mm.
So it's like that with everything else for me too, and even raising children too. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to stand up and say something, and it's okay for somebody to disagree with you,
Mhm.
because this is gonna it's gonna encourage other kids who are uncomfortable to say what their point of view is. But if they really disagree with you, they might stand up and they might have a really good debate for you, and it might change your perspective. You might completely change the way that you looked at that topic. And it all of that with risk taking, with boundaries, being the initiator of a new conversation, changing the conversation.
Mhm. I think that's something that's so unique about this topic is that taking a risk does encompass all of these aspects of our life. And I think that's something, I mean, I think it's amazing that you are pointing out these things because it does just speak to that idea of, how cohesive this is within our lives and how, we either have to take that risks or we find ourselves in this place where we're becoming kind of stuck in our environment and stuck in this place where fear is guiding our movements rather than the opportunities that can exist outside of this place of comfort that so many of us find ourselves kind of dwelling in and residing in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did want to make a point. I told you that my sister and my mom and I had talked about your topics here.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to share with you was your last question. Moving forward, what I feel like I would take more risks.
Hmm.
Um, and my sister, she's quite the intellect. They have we geek out on the regular on strange things, but she uh she said, "Well, I feel like that's the same question as what was before." And my mom and I were both like, "Absolutely not. This is a totally different question." So back to perspective again. It's how do you relate to your risks? How do you hear the questions? How do you
Yeah.
perceive them, and how do you choose to answer them? Um, so I just wanted to tell you that too. I thought that was just a really fun conversation that we had earlier, and how the differences of how close we are, but how different our train of thought would be.
The funny thing is, as I was like writing the questions, I was thinking, do these sound the same? And there were different parts of me that were, one part of me was like, yeah, this can be answered the same exact way, and I'm wondering if I should change it up. But then there's another part of me that's saying like, wait a minute, like there can be so much here just in like kind of further investigating and understanding, what may be a possibility as far as like what can come from this answer. I don't know.
Right? No, keep them, keep them. I think it's a great dynamic to have there.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I think this went over pretty well.
Well, thanks, Ty. I had a really good time. I appreciate you having me.
So that was my interview with Rebecca. It was a pleasure having her on the show. I'm very happy that she was able to join me. So this was just one of the interviews of the two-part series for taking risks. And just one thing I wanted to point out was this idea of comfort zones. It's something that I think a lot of us can find a similarity in when we think about this idea of taking risks, where a lot of times we can be stuck in our own comfort zones and deny taking that risk or making that leap because it may disrupt this idea of what we have in front of us and what that may mean as far as like the potential of what we may get out of taking that risk. So this idea of comfort zone is something that's really big. So yeah, keep an eye out for the second part of this episode. It should be coming out very soon. It's not going to be too long after this first episode gets aired. So yeah, so that's going to be that. If you want to send any topics in, I guess from now until the very short time when the next episode gets uploaded, you can send them to everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com. You can join the Instagram page or follow the Instagram page, everything.sunpodcast, or you can go to Twitter at everysunpodcast. The Instagram page will have the photos that I was speaking about in the beginning of the episode regarding the person that dressed up as a female to try to lure out this predator from the local recreation areas. So that's going to be in the link. I mean, and a link to his Instagram is going to be there. But a photo of that, of what I'm speaking about, will be on the Instagram page. So follow that to see that. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Love you all.